Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegrand, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Hoges recap the Twins' 4-game series against the Detroit Tigers. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me today, special third chair guest host Andrew Hoges Hoganson, filling in after a series that, my goodness, Hoges, it certainly seemed like this team was going to take 3 of 4 from the mighty, mighty Detroit Tigers.
I'm happy to be back. It kind of feels like this is the start of my season almost a little bit. Like, it's been weird getting in. Like, I agree with what you guys were saying at the beginning of the year and even in this series. All these postponements and even these day games, I'm not as into it as I feel like I normally am at this point in time of the year. Not that I'm less excited about this team or anything like that, but those off days are brutal, and getting on the podcast again I think is a good way to kind of kick me off a little bit. So yeah, this series, it was so close to being everything that we wanted, but just a few slip-ups there at the bottom of the 8th today, and we are where we are.
We are where we are. Isn't that the truth? And that's currently 3.5 back from Cleveland, 4th place in the AL Central. It's way too early to be looking at standings in any sort of real concrete manner, but one thing, Hoges, that you could look at if you were a Twins player was a bingo card. I guess Pablo Lopez, he saw that the game was going to be postponed. He organized a bingo room he was the caller and he had catered food and stuff. They really made a big deal about this, like the Twins media. It was on every social account. There were like 9 different interviews before the game the next day about this bingo thing. That just seems like they made a real big deal out of like a kind of just a, would you have been that excited about this?
No. Do we have a team of 75-year-olds? Like, is that what's going on right now? It seems like that would make a boring off day even more boring if you asked me. But.
All right, well, enough about bingo. Let's go ahead and jump into the series recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, the first game on Thursday was postponed to be a doubleheader on Saturday, and so on Friday was the first time the Twins and Tigers met, and it was still delayed by rain. Obviously, a lot of weather in Detroit. It's cold, it's rainy, there's absolutely nobody in the stands, and Pablo Lopez, Hoges, I think he's a guy who loves his routine and who loved the sunshine, and he got neither of those things on this day. Twins lose this one 8-2, and honestly, a lot of that blame has to be placed at the feet of Pablo Lopez.
Yeah, he didn't pitch great. 4 innings pitched, 6 hits, 5 earned runs, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts, and then he gave up a home run. But it's kind of been a theme for me in this whole series to not overreact, because you guys made a good point in the previous episode that if they had a stretch like this at the beginning of the year, somewhere in the middle, I mean, they're 2 games under 500. You're not going to be freaking out that much. And so I think the Pablo start is kind of like that. He didn't look great out there, but he had the rain delay. The weather was disgusting, and he had a bad game. I don't think there's anything more to read into it than that. If something starts happening in the next few starts, then we can talk about it then, but I'm considering this a one-off. This game was just kind of a shove right away, and it is what it is.
It just didn't feel like the game was being played, and obviously the biggest note to come out of this game, Carlos Correa leaves early with a right oblique strain. He didn't look right after he made a great diving grab in the bottom of the second. He came up in a big spot with 2 guys on, 2 outs, and he didn't even swing the bat after his first hack because he was like, I didn't want to injure my oblique any further than it was already injured, and so he thought he could maybe work a walk out of that. But if you're not willing to swing the bat, Hoges, that's going to be a difficult walk to earn.
Right. That was a little bit concerning to me too. Maybe he just didn't really believe that it was what it was. When they did talk to him after, I think it was the day after when he had got the MRI, he said he'd been dealing with congestion also because he'd been sick. So I wonder if he kind of just thought it was more cold than an actual oblique. Well, they changed it now. It's not an oblique strain anymore. It was I don't remember. They changed whatever the phrasing was, and I guess it's a lot less severe than they originally thought. But man, it's just brutal seeing a guy like that. And he said it himself. He was having a fantastic April. He was batting .306. His play in the field was phenomenal. It was a killer game.
Yeah, this was rough. Not a lot of silver linings here. I guess if you're a big Michael Tonkin fan, I hope you really enjoyed his outing here because you'll probably never see him pitch in a Twins uniform again. But then again, Hoges, you could have said that 10 years ago and you would have been wrong because here was Michael Tonkin on the Twins roster.
It's true. You never know. The Twins are like that team that just always kind of keeps those guys in the back burner. Like, oh, that guy. Like, I mean, Miguel Sano very easily could be our trade deadline pickup this year. I mean, let's just wait and see.
He could be. I watched Kyle Gibson pitch against the Diamondbacks, and he looked really good until he didn't.
That's what Gibson is. Gibson is the weirdest ex-Twins pitcher ever because I'm convinced he's phenomenal and awful all at the same time. He is the epitome of the Little League one inning where it's like, oh yeah, we had a great game for 5 out of 6 innings, but then I gave up 7 runs in that 6th inning, so you know.
Last note on this game, Hogs. Clearly, Bally Sports North was stretched because they had the Wolves on, they had the Wild on, and the Twins definitely got the JV squad because the audio in and out, terrible, mics weren't on. There was one inning that started and there was a whole at bat happened where I'm pretty sure Provis didn't realize that his mic wasn't on. So then it just sort of like him starting to talk. I think he was told that his mic wasn't on immediately prior to the start of his next sentence. So he like comes in and he's like, poor at bat. Like, and that's like all you hear. It's like, okay, well, whoever is manning the boards for Bally Sports, I hope that you're still an apprentice because you got some things to learn about audio, my friends.
Why is it that obvious? Like, seriously, it can't be. I mean, this is a guy who has no idea how to do any of that stuff, but it doesn't seem like it should be that hard. I guess those TV contracts that we're getting paid for are basically nothing because we can't add anyone to our baseball team anymore, but maybe that's what it is. They just pick guys up on the street and say, here's the on button. May the Lord be with you.
All right, well, let's keep going here. Game 2, Twins come away with this one 11-5 after 12 innings, Hogs. The first game of a doubleheader on Saturday, and what do you want, Hogs, more than anything in a doubleheader? You want extra innings. So this one goes 12 innings, and a whole bunch of shenanigans led to this Twins victory.
Yeah, what a weird game. Like, you say 11-5, you are not thinking extra innings at all. And when I'm trying to analyze this series, part of it is, and we'll get to it, is like just the offense not coming through and that margin of victory for being so small. This game skews that so much, but it doesn't. It doesn't. Because it was 3-3 going into extra innings, and then 11-5.
We're going to talk about this game a lot in the segments, but a couple of notes here. Joe Ryan pitched phenomenally. 6 innings pitched, only 1 earned run, but 12 strikeouts, Hogs. He was all around the zone, but the only pitch that he screwed up on that was very in the zone, he got punished for.
It's the Joe Ryan way. Like, if you're gonna, when he makes a mistake, it is gone. But hey, so far this year, this is one prediction that I'm very happy to be wrong with so far. He looks phenomenal. And the biggest thing I think with that is he's added some heat to his fastball. Like, he's not in the 94s now. It's more 95, some 96s. And it seems to be working really, really, really well for him. I love that confidence. He's just a likable guy too. So it's fun watching him succeed. Very quirky, and I like that.
A lot of guys need some special shout outs here, but there was a great leaping grab by Farmer in the bottom of the 8th. We'll talk about the top of the 8th, Jeffers' heroics a little bit later. And then the last thing I want to mention, like I said, we'll circle back to this in the segments, but Alcala got sent down, Hogs, before game 4 when Thielbar got activated. And there was a lot of discussion about that because he'd pitched pretty well. But Rocco said in the postgame that, well, no, we sent him down because there were a couple of reasons, things he still needed to work on getting ahead of hitters and things. However, it seems odd that you wouldn't have sent like Funderburk down because now you have Thielbar kind of coming in as your lefty. And what bothers me about Alcala, well, yeah, we'll talk about that here next game. But what bothers me here about Alcala is that he failed to cover first in the bottom of the 11th of this game, and it could have been a big double play. Now, granted, it didn't really matter in the long run. Twins still come away with the victory, but I do wonder if that's sort of stuck in Rocco's head. But we'll talk about Simeon Woods-Richardson here in game 3.
I love it. It's the only reason you went for it is because Dan's not here right now. You're like, I can do it. I can do it.
I tried my best. SWR, I apologize. I will figure out how to say your name eventually here. But we'll talk about him next game here in a moment, and he also had a play that he failed to cover first. But I do wonder if that was part of the reason he got sent down is like, hey, man, you got to be paying attention on the field when there's plays to be made.
Well, Rocco's comments were pretty cryptic, too, when he was talking about that. He did list very specific things that he wanted them to work on, but it is weird to send a guy down after he's been as successful as Alcala has been so far this year. I wouldn't doubt it one bit if it played a role. And there's been a lot of comments on Twitter with like the John Boy account that managing is quote unquote back this year because managers appear to be taking like just a harder stance on a lot of stuff with these guys. Like Ron Washington's a great example with that guy overran second base when he's like, that won't happen again. If he does that again, he's not on the team anymore. I kind of like that old school, grumpy old man manager kind of attitude. It just reminds me of the good old days with like Jim Leland and Tito and all of that, and shed a tear for Dan for that one. But yeah, I'm sure it had a role because how do you send a guy down he's producing? You can't argue that. So Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this bullpen going forward.
Yeah, well, let's go on to game 3 here. SWR seizes the moment and puts together a stellar performance here, going 6 innings pitched, only 1 earned run, 5 strikeouts. I have to think, Hogs, Twins fans should feel a little bit better, I think, about the depth of this rotation if this is the caliber starter that SWR is. And I'm not sure. It's one start. I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but man, he looked good.
I don't know if you've ever listened to this podcast, David, but blowing things out of proportion is what we do best. But wait, we have to give Dan his flowers here a little bit. Like, I know you did not like his crazy prediction of the year with SWR, but so far that one looks pretty good. Debating how crazy it actually was or not, but yeah, he looked great, and that is something that we needed, especially with Louis Varland already being called up, and just what we've dealt through with De Rotini already being out for the year. Like, this is something that's important.
De Sclafani, De Lasagna. It's really difficult to keep those straight.
I cannot do it. De Scalafini. I have no idea.
Yeah, not a lot to say about this game, honestly. It was a pretty uneventful baseball game. Willie Castro and Julian lead the offense with home runs. Buxton had a sacrifice fly, which apparently is all he can do offensively.
It's apparently all the Twins can do offensively. My goodness, some games.
Very accurate. But Twins win this one 4-1. I don't have a lot of notes on this. Anything from you, Hope?
No, I don't really. It was nice seeing Cole Sands have a decent outing there at the end to wrap it up. The bullpen's looking good so far this year, even with the injuries that they've had. I mean, we still haven't even seen Duran yet. Like, it's crazy how well they've held it together. Starting pitching has still been good in this game. Really, really nice to see SWR have a game like that so early in the year.
But as far as the excellence in starting pitching, I think that pivots well into game 4. Bailey Ober, certainly I think that first start against the Royals, something happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if he forgot again that the season started and he was still working on some pitches thinking it was spring training, but the way that he pitched against the Dodgers and then the way that he pitched in this game, 6 innings pitched, no earned runs, 3 strikeouts. Again, he didn't make a mistake. The one mistake he probably made was the leadoff double in the 7th that allowed him to get pulled. And even then, I think you can't blame Rocco for pulling him in that moment, obviously, but at the same time, part of me was like, I don't know, maybe you let it ride here.
Yeah, I do actually like the pull because you have guys that are fresh in your bullpen that are able to come in. It just didn't work out this time. But yeah, Bailey Ober coming through in the clutch. Great start. We talked about this a little bit earlier, David, but it does seem like the Royals had something on him. And then you look at the Royals game this week, they played Hunter Brown against the Astros, and they put up 9 runs in the first inning. And Hunter Brown's a phenom. Like, he's supposed to be phenomenal. He's not having a good year at all this year, but you kind of wonder if their advanced team is doing something. I'm not accusing them of cheating by any stretch of the word, but I wonder if they've got some guy there that is really good at picking up if pitchers are tipping pitches. It just seemed like that because Ober pitched great against the Dodgers and then great against the Tigers here. It's super encouraging to see that, and I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit because that was my prediction that he might be our number 2 starter this year. The numbers still don't look great because of the Royals start, but 2 out of 3 is pretty good.
The starting rotation, as much of a concern as that's been, none of our concerns, just like last season, honestly, almost none of these losses can be chalked up to poor pitching performances. It's all at the feet of the offense.
Isn't that weird, though? Like, all the stuff that's gone wrong and who we've had to throw out there already. Dan and I were definitely overreacting after the first 2 games of the Dodgers series. We're like, is this a bad baseball team? Part of that was because of the starting pitching, how good it's been and just how lackluster we've been. But again, tell me you haven't seen this before. I mean, this has been 2023 all over again.
Would you think they would have made some corrections between last year and this year if you knew you were going to experience the same issues? It seems like, shouldn't you have been prepared for this?
That's why it just kills me, and we'll talk more about this, but Correa and Lewis going down. I mean, Lewis, smallest sample size ever. He was 2 for 2. It was looking beautiful. Correa's batting .306. A guy who historically struggles always in April. It hurts.
Yeah, it hurts more than this individual game hurt, but this game hurt as well, Hogs. Twins are leading this one 3-0. Bottom of the 8th, everything falls apart. The Tigers score all 4 of their runs in the bottom of the 8th in just a shenanigan-filled inning. And we'll get into this into the segments. Hogs and I have a little bit of a disagreement exactly who the finger ought to be pointed at. But Castro and Farmer, in my opinion, should have had errors targeted against them. And even though Thielbar had a rough outing in his return, he was not helped by the defense at at all, Hoges.
But that's the part that's a bummer here, because that's where the margin of error is. Like, there just isn't that much with the way that this offense is producing. And I talk about this almost every single time I'm on this podcast. Recency bias with me is a real big thing. And it's just so hard to look at this game and not overreact to it, because David, how different would you feel if we won 3 out of 4?
Very different. I think I don't feel as drastically different as I would have if they lost this game like 8-0. Like, they lost this game because of some bad bounces and some bad pitches in the 8th inning.
Yeah.
But they only went 1 for 4 with runners in scoring position. So, that also comes into play here, that again, if the offense could put up a few more runs, you'd have a little bit more leeway for fielding mistakes and for bad pitches.
I loved your guys' argument about what's worse, 0 for 3 with runners in scoring position or 0 for 9 with runners in scoring position. And these numbers are getting, again, quote unquote, better, but 4 at-bats with runners in scoring position. Come on, boys. Like, who are we playing right now? Are these the Detroit Tigers? Like, do you think this Tigers team is for real? I know we're not that far into the season, and they're only 9-6 too, but do you think this team is better than maybe we thought they were going into it?
No, it's way too early for any of these people talking about how great the Royals are, or how the Guardians are having a bounce back season, or the Tigers are going to return to dominance. I know that they have a couple of young guys who they're excited about, but no, the Twins, had they had any semblance of what this team could possibly do from an offensive perspective, should have taken 3 of 4 from them. And had that game 1 not been postponed, I know that there's no way to tell this. Pablo's not giving up that same run count if it's sunny outside and the game is played at a scheduled time.
I agree. Look at last year. The Pittsburgh Pirates were like 20-6 in April or whatever. Like, let's just all wait and chill out a little bit.
Let's hang on here. I think with that, Hoges, let's go ahead and jump into our segment.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
It's a bit apropos, Hoges, that you are on the podcast and you got a victory here, taking Martin out of anybody, Hoges. Austin Martin with 6 points gets you the victory.
Does that get me the half point too? I didn't look too close enough at it. Oh, I said Jeffers did. Jeffers dominated. I forgot about him.
Jeffers did. You were right. Jeffers had 14 points. So just so folks understand, we have added a new rule for Puckett's Picks. It's in the episode description as well if you want to see how this works. But basically, if you picked the guy who won for Puckett's Picks, you get your standard point per usual. But if the guy you picked also had the highest point total on the team as a whole, you get a 0.5 bonus. So in this instance, no, Hoges will get just 1 point because Jeffers had 14 points. He obviously had a great outing. I took Buxton, who had -4, which is a new high-low, is what I like to call it. So the lowest point total on the season thus far for Puckett's Picks. And then the listeners had -1 with Correa, and unfortunately there was no way to bounce back from that as Correa only played in game 1. And Dan took Kirilloff, which seemed like a good pick at the time, but he balanced out at 0. That then puts the season totals at Hoges in the lead with 2.5 because of one particular bonus he had against the Guardians. I'm in second place with 2. Dan's in third place with 1.5. And honestly, this is shocking. The listeners are still winless on the season, Hoges.
Well, that's because they don't have me picking for them anymore. But in reality,
I don't know that we want to insult the listeners, Hoges. That's not. I know that you're not on every episode, but my goodness, we like people listening.
I try to
this
push
show
down your viewership whenever I'm on here. That's my goal. But I was thinking about that when you were putting these numbers in here earlier. I don't think I would critique a single one of their picks that they've had this year. They've been the rather obvious picks. I mean, the Lewis one screwed them over in the first series, but everything else, I mean, it's a little bit of doing my method where they're chasing victories a bit, but you have to go with the hot hand. That's the smart way to do it. But I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to defend my Martin pick this series. When I was looking at him in order to pick him, he's the one guy who seems to be putting the ball in play all the time. Like, even when he's getting out, their lineouts, their flyouts, their groundouts. And with the way that this team is playing on offense right now, you're almost trying to pick the guy who's going to strike out the least. I mean, yes, you can get the flash in a pan with getting Jeffers when he's had such a phenomenal series, but 6 points is winning more often than not. And that's a little depressing, but I tried to go a little bit more conservative with the pick, and it paid off for me really well here. And it's encouraging to see him putting the ball in play. And I love that Rocco's saying if guys are doing that right now, they're going to get more playing time.
Yeah, I do think that he's here to stay. I don't think that there's a lot of competition for that spot currently because all the guys who would be competition are on the IL for the Saints.
Yeah.
So what it really comes down to is he's getting at bats and he's making the most of them. I know that he's not the most versatile player, but I mean, he can play in the outfield and he can play a little bit in the infield. I don't think there's any issue seeing him on the team long term. I mean, at least until a lot of these guys are starting to come back healthy.
But you made a great point. Who else? Like Brooks Lee can't come up. So, I mean, that's what it is.
When they put Correa on the IL, they're like, we'll just bring a third catcher. Like that's the best they could come up with. They couldn't even find a position player who would fit any sort of sense into this roster.
Which that actually is a bonus to Jeffers too, because when they're saying that, I'm guessing they want Jeffers in the lineup every day. So even if he's not catching, he's probably going to be DHing right now. And I love that. And I don't know if you saw this quote, David, but in the Dodger series, he was talking about how the whole team needs to change their approach because of all these strikeouts. So he said he's been batting with his 2-strike approach. So he's not stepping, doing like the high step before.
Yeah.
Look at the results. Can we all do that? Like if one more guy strikes out with a guy on third base and less than 2 outs, I am going to lose my mind. I cannot handle that. Sure, that is going to happen sometimes, but with the Twins, it is every single time. And like I already said earlier, apparently the only way we can score runs is with sacrifice flies. So we got to put the ball in play.
Fans want an ejection. There it goes. And that was Gardy's gripe.
I deserved it. I absolutely deserved that. Here's the thing. I haven't been on in a bit, so I have all of this built-up aggression that didn't necessarily happen in these series, so I'm sorry about taking like a more holistic view of everything. Got to get it out. It's not healthy to keep it in.
No, well, let's let you keep talking about Jeffers here. Let's go on to Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
So this is a weird one for me. I'm not picking Martin, which just feels a little bit wrong. Like I feel like I'm supposed to be picking my guy who won Puckett's picks, but I have to go with Jeffers. He was 1 for 4 with a double in game 1, 2 for 3 with a homer in game 2, 2 for 3 in the second game of the doubleheader, and then 1 for 5 today with an RBI. He is getting it done at the plate. I love that he changed his approach. It's weird having a catcher that is maybe our biggest offensive threat right now. After a very slow start to the season, he is carrying on with the momentum that he had at the end of the year last year, and I know you love him, David, so you have to love seeing this.
I love him. I love his smile. I love his swing. There's just so much I love about Ryan Jeffers.
Wallner's lengthy thigh. I can't get over that.
Yeah, that was an interesting piece of the last episode. But anyway, I am going to go with the starting pitchers as a whole minus Pablo.
You yell at me for this stuff all the time. You can't just
sort of
pick the bench to go on the bench.
Okay. Here's the thing. You take out Pablo, you have 18 innings pitched and 2 earned runs between the other 3 games of this series. That deserves some praise. If I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Ober because he didn't allow any earned runs. But honestly, SWR as well as Joe Ryan, they deserve a lot of praise. They're stepping up when this team desperately needs good pitching, knowing that the offense isn't going to put up big numbers.
If you had to pick another offensive player for Beast anyways, who would you pick? I mean,
I think it has to be Austin Martin. Honestly, that would have to be who you would pick.
It's wild.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. With that, Hoges, who do you have on your bench?
I went with Farmer, and this is me being a little bit more holistic again. He didn't have the worst series in the world. I think your pick that we'll get to is probably a better pick for this particular series. But we are paying Farmer $6 million a year so that when Royce Lewis and Carlos Correa are hurt, that he is a reliable producer in this lineup, and he is not doing that. He's batting 83 right now. Drives me crazy. He is also on my fantasy baseball team, but hopefully not much longer, if we're being honest.
I don't know. I don't understand what's happening. When they announced that Willie Castro was going to be the primary shortstop while Correa is on the IL,
right? Like
that was baffling.
What is going on?
The whole reason you have Farmer, the reason you're paying him $6 million is because he can play shortstop every day.
That's what I thought.
And you're not having him play shortstop every day. I'm very confused.
Unless they are overreacting to a small sample size here. But I don't know if it's an overreaction either. I don't know. It just seems really, really, really bizarre.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
That's Rocco after Correa got injured.
Dan's killing me. Now, I have always been like a huge Rocco fan, and it's just the whole you buy a red truck, you see a red truck thing. Dan's whole thing of Rocco saying, I didn't really think about that. He does that a lot. Like, he legitimately does that a lot. It scares me. I don't like it.
Anyway, I'm going to put Wallner on the bench, and here's what I have to say. Buddy, I get it. You're from Minnesota. I'm going to cheer for you, but count your days here, because as soon as Trevor Larnach's ready to go, I think we're going to see a swap here. And honestly, people might just look at the stat lines. If you only look at the stat lines and you look at the box scores and you don't piece together what happened, Wallner hit a 3-run homer off of a position player, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit here. But you take that away, he had 4 strikeouts and 1 walk, which was intentional, by the way, which I am very confused about. It was game 4 today, 2 outs. They walked intentionally Wallner, who doesn't understand the strike zone.
To be
what
fair,
he's looking
generally the umpire behind him also doesn't understand said strike zone when he's up.
That being said, are you telling me you would have done the same thing where the team intentionally walked Wallner? They didn't throw a pitch on 3-1. They intentionally walked Wallner to get to Eddie Julian?
Yeah. I don't understand. It really makes no sense. The only thing with him is I'm willing to give him a little bit. I don't know if a longer leash is the word. I wouldn't mind so much if they did send him down to AAA when guys start getting healthy again. This is his second year, and he had a phenomenal rookie year. In no way am I concerned about this guy going forward. This happens with young ball players, but it is happening at a very inopportune time when we're already thin on the offensive side of the ball.
All right, well, with that, let's go on to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
I have a couple of questions here. I'm going to rattle them off, folks, and you kind of give me answers rapid style here, okay? First of all, do you think that SWR did enough for Rocco to encourage the front office to keep him for another start?
It's weird, though, because then who do you skip or what do you do? Like, because you had that extra guy for the doubleheader. Well, what do you do going forward?
You send Camargo back down.
I guess, but then what's your rotation? You doing a 6-man rotation for a while then? In short, yes, he did enough to earn it. I just don't know how, like what the logistics of that are. But as we've seen with this team, that normally solves itself.
Well, I think if Varland pitches poorly in his next outing, he gets sent down and SWR stays up to make his next start.
Or, like, I know they're trying to give Varland every opportunity to be a starter. I don't hate him in the bullpen. I really don't.
Kind of seems like things are going to shake out that way unless he can turn it around. I said this before, that he really needed to make a good start to ensure that he's going to get more opportunities as a starter, and he hasn't done that yet.
And he looked really, I know he gave up like some hard hit balls in that Astros series and the Blue Jays series, but he looked really good. Like, he's throwing 97, 98, and he's got that cutter. Like, that's nasty bullpen stuff, and I know he doesn't want that, and I know the money's in a starter, but ultimately, like, if he can't start, that's where you're going to go. I mean, look at Duran. Worked out pretty well for him.
Secondly, would you have pulled Ober today after giving up the leadoff double in the 7th?
Yes, because you have those guys that are fresh. I still feel like they treat Ober like he's a glorified AAA starter, so they can't go much past 85 pitches anyways. I don't mind the quick hook in a close ball game. If it was 4-5 to nothing, then sure, put him back out there till he gives up a run. But he's not that seasoned guy yet. 6 innings, solid ball, 2 good starts in a row. I think that matters to a pitcher's psyche. Obviously, it's going to suck when you end up giving up those runs, but they had Brock Stewart coming in who got out of the inning. So I don't know how you don't call that a success. And then it all unraveled from there, but we'll get to it. There's more factors than just if Ober would have still been in there, because he's not pitching the 8th.
Yeah, true story. I guess my last question here is, it was a little confusing in game 2, top of 9. You had Buxton come in as a pinch runner for Miranda, and then Vasquez is coming up next to the plate. I guess in that instance, I know that Buxton has had his struggles, and Vasquez is looking a little bit better than last season, but I guess I would have preferred Buxton to pinch for Vasquez as opposed to running for Miranda in that scenario.
I agree with you mostly, but I think Rocco is managing this year like everyone has a blank slate. Like, it seems like that, with even giving Martin more chances. He's not going with guys that have just historically been in that position, and Vasquez has been good to start the year, and Buxton's cold, so I understand that part of it. But if it were me managing, yeah, I'd want Buxton up there instead of Vasquez hitting. But I think it is encouraging, not to get too distracted from this point, that they are using Buxton in those situations. They're pinch hitting him. They put him in as a defensive replacement today. That's so encouraging. Yeah, sure, he's not producing right now, but they're clearly not questioning his health if they're throwing him in situations like that. Because before, if it was a Buxton off day, half the team could be dead and there was no way he was coming in.
We're just going to go without a left fielder, I guess is what we'll do. So with that, Hogs, what do you have for Rocco?
Mine is a little bit more wider than this team being so horrible in April. It's consistent now. What can Rocco do to not have that happen in 2025? I mean, even last year, I think we forget how bad the offense was until the second half of the season. Like, it was horrible the entire first half. And people keep telling me that, like, they were bad the whole first half. Can he do anything to change it? Is that just the players that they have on the team?
I thought that they would for sure be striking out less this season than they did last season in April. That doesn't seem to be the case. They keep putting up Ks at just astonishing numbers. It's almost impressive how many times they're striking out a game. Is it an approach issue like Jeffers is talking about? I don't really know, but yeah, it does seem like they need to do something, because yeah, across baseball, pitching always starts ahead of hitting. There's no questioning that. The stats bear that out. However, you should be better than what you are currently if you're the Twins roster.
Some of those numbers that Gleeman has been throwing up lately, I like how I use that, because it is like vomit. it at this point in time with how bad they are. But it's insane. Like, batting average is in the 100. OPS is like 400. So it's just stupid, like how bad and inept they are. It's not entertaining baseball. I think that's what's killing me a little bit. Like, and I think it maybe has me a little more down on the team. Like Dan and I overreacting after the dot. Like, it's just not fun to watch when your team is so, like, you had a good tweeter. Giving up 2 runs in the first inning now feels like you have to scale Everest in order to win. Yeah. And it shouldn't feel like that. Like you're tempted to put the Twins onto the small screen TV after that happens because you're like, well, this one's toast.
Make a move. They're down by 2 with 8 to play. Yeah, you know what? It's a little too rich for my blood. Let's move on over, see what other sporting events we can put on the big TV. Well, let's move forward here. Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
I'm going to start because I'm positive. I'm Mr. Positive on the podcast. We all know that I'm the optimist on the team here.
Help us all if that's the case.
So I have to go with just Jeffers, I guess, in Game 2 is sort of my Minnesota moment. So Game 2, top 8, he comes in with a pinch hit home run to tie the game at 3. And then in the top of the 12th, 2 outs, bases loaded, Jeffers scorches a ball to the third baseman. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't think they're going to get the out at second. So it is a throw across the diamond, and anything can happen with a throw from third base to first base. But no, the ball goes through McKinstry's feet, like between his legs, not really a glove on it at all. And I didn't even cheer. My hand just went to my mouth like, what?
They got their revenge on us a little bit for that today,
yes.
too. But yeah, it's great. Like, it's fun seeing when he comes up in a big moment. You're like, yeah, that's the guy who I want up.
And then what I like about this the most, I think, Hoges, is the third baseman, McKinstry, who gives up this air. He's forced to pitch as the position player because now there's enough of a deficit that the Tigers can have a position player pitch, which AJ Hinch, absolute savage. Are you kidding me? You're like, hey, you know what? You just made an error that cost us the game. Why don't you get out on the mound and throw a couple of pitches? Immediately gives up a home run to Matt Wallner, which Park was tweeting this, the beat reporter for MLB.com for the Twins. He was talking to Matt Wallner before the game, and Matt Wallner was talking about how he just needs to get even a bad hit, just something, and then things are going to click for him. This shouldn't count. I'm sorry. But if you're a professional baseball player and what you need is to hit a home run off of a position player to get your confidence back, I don't know that should be what does it, I guess, in my head.
It's like saying an NHL player who scores an empty net goal as their slump's over. They're back.
I'm back. I'm back, baby.
That is brutal, though. To put in the guy who basically cost the game, they're like, all right, now you're going to pay for it on the mound.
Oh, man. Wait, there's okay, I'm sure the optics weren't like that. Like, I'm sure
for sure,
didn't, come on over and, here's what you get for that. But, I mean, everybody in the world is thinking it. Nobody's not thinking that's why he's pitching.
How often is a position pitcher, throwing in extra innings now with these new rules, too? It's just a kind of funny, unique thing anyways.
A very good point. You're not going to see that too often. What's your moment here, Hoges? Mr. Pessimist, I guess, today.
Yeah, I went negative, and I know you don't like how I'm phrasing this, but I went with the bullpen blowing it in the bottom of the 8th today. Because that was, to me, the Minnesota moment is the most pivotal point in the series. That doesn't happen. We go 3 of 4. We have a whole different complexion on this whole team. I think that just all changed right there at the end of the series.
So Thielbar comes in, his first outing of the year. It doesn't go well. He ends this game with an ERA of 81.00, which is, it's always fun the way that those relievers, if they have a poor first outing, what that looks like on the stat sheet. But here's the thing. Castro had a ball that they didn't count as an error because it sort of came up and he knocked it down, though. He touched it. I don't quite understand how they gave him a hit. And then Farmer, it didn't touch him. So Farmer misplays a ball at third base. He doesn't get his body in front of it. And so they don't give him an error. And this is super similar to the hit that Kirilloff had for a triple when he hit it to Naylor at first base and he didn't get a glove on it either. But in that instance, I was happy that they gave Kirilloff a triple. And in this instance, I was super annoyed that Farmer didn't get an error that I felt he deserved.
Well, you know what it's called, David? It's a dumb. They both got dumbs there for sure because you're not going to give him an error.
Okay, but I agree with you. I love the dumbs thing. It's been one of my favorite things that you've ever said throughout the course of our entire friendship. I think that it's a very good description, and it's something that baseball should adopt somehow. Maybe a more official title, but I do love dumbs a lot. But what I'll have to say about this, Hoges, is in this instance, this isn't a dumb. To me, those should both be errors.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you for sure, because you can't let balls like that go through. It seems like they're a little more happy to give out hits in those situations, which I'm sure pitchers just love. But yeah, that was frustrating. It was frustrating to see. Those are the stuff that kind of kills a team. It's just like domino effects. It's heartbreaking to see when you're a pitcher when a play like that happens. I mean, literally the same thing happened to the Tigers in the game before. So I hope that isn't a trend. But we don't have our studs out there in the infield, and I'm worried that this will happen more. Like we're clearly going to feel it on the offensive side. I think it would be irresponsible if we didn't realize how much it does impact us defensively too. I mean, Correa is a platinum glove shortstop, and you miss those guys and you're throwing other people around that aren't where they normally are. That's what's going to happen.
I think that's a great point. I think that if Royce Lewis is at third base and Carlos Correa is at shortstop, I think the Twins win this game. And it's sort of funny to say that they could have gone 0 for 5 each of them, and I think the Twins still would have won this game just because they were on the field defensively. But with that, let's go on to Maurer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Maurer's musings.
I think the biggest question for this team going forward is, when are these guys going to get healthy? When are they coming back? And when they do come back, is this going to be something that we deal with the entire year? Because these are soft tissue injuries. It's not like a bone break where you come back, the bone's healed. A quad can act up again. Oblique can act up again. I'm worried that when they get these guys back, this might be something that we're dealing with long term.
Yeah, it'll be disappointing if these guys are never fully healthy. I mean, all you can really ask for is for this team to be in contention and these guys enter the postseason at 100% health, but that may be too much to ask for.
The schedule isn't that bad. I mean, the next couple of series are a little rough, but like the schedule isn't that bad in the first half of the year. We need to pile up these wins, or else it's going to become a 4-team race with 3 teams that probably don't deserve it, but the longer you keep them in it, the longer things can happen.
Absolutely. And this leads well into my question here, which is really, what does the team need to do for this to be called a success until Correa and Lewis return? If we call it, let's say June, I guess, when they return. I think that's a conservative estimate. Hopefully that's a conservative estimate, I suppose. What would you walk away with, Hoges, thinking, okay, I'm happy with how they perform?
It's weird because they're 2 games under 500 right now, and it feels pretty awful. But I think my answer is stick within 2 or 3 games of 500. Like if they can maintain where they are now and they get those guys back, I think they'll be okay. Ultimately, that's kind of what they did all year last year. I know people are saying, we were talking about this earlier, that the Central's a 4-team race right now. It's not. Like it just isn't. Those teams aren't going to maintain that. I think the Guardians will be around because they just always are. And maybe one of the Royals or Tigers will stick around. Ultimately, a few games over 500, I still think is going to win this division. So as long as they keep within 2 or 3 of 500, that'd be my answer.
Fair enough. Well, let's go forward here, Hoges. Series grades time.
Series grades.
So, Hoges, I'm going to start. We'll have you give your grade, and then I want to get your thoughts on Dan's new grading system. Maybe your thoughts on his initial grading system, and then how he's tweaked it. But I'm going to give him a D+ here. The starting pitching was so good. The bullpen overall was fine. They should have won Game 4 with good fielding in the bottom of the 8th, but this, again, it comes down to the lack of offensive production. 6 for 35 in the series with runners in scoring position, batting 171. Those are Joey Gallo-type numbers, Hoges. We can't have that for the entirety of this offensive roster.
I had a D+ as well, but I changed it to a C- because I didn't want to have my negative reaction to the game that I just watched a few hours ago determine my grade. So I think I tried to push myself too far in the opposite direction. I don't ultimately disagree with you at all. It's not an F because they did have solid pitching performances, but you just have to do better against a team like this.
Your thoughts on Dan's initial grading segment, and then how he's tweaked it now to this whole advanced retreat / well-played baseball rubric.
I wish he would have kept it how it was. I loved it. You and I got in a pretty heated discussion about it, which was hilarious because Dan wasn't even responding at all through all of it, as I'm just dying on a hill for his new grading scale. I feel bad about this, but I honestly, when I'm listening to the podcast, when it gets to series grade, whatever I'm doing, I lean back. I take a little moment because I'm like, Dan's going to talk for a while. This is going to just take forever. And so ultimately, I like it. I do like it. I hate the out of 20 because it just doesn't make any sense. I can't. And then he says it's a C. And I loved how you did it in the last podcast. We're like, okay, it was 14 out of 20. So 7 out of 10 to, yeah, C. That tracks. Why is it out of 20.
It's those teachers, man. They hate those well-rounded numbers. They like to have some wiggle room and make it seem like, I think that's the problem. Because he's an English teacher and not a math teacher, he doesn't understand like how fractions reduce and how like you can make things like make a little bit more sense. But English teachers, they're not all about the black and white, the right and the wrong.
It's all the subjective.
They like the subjectivity, and the interpretation. So that's why he kind of buys in a little bit more.
I like that about his grade though, because I think what we try to do like very succinctly and clearly, he likes to spell out a little bit more with what you're so I liked it how he had originally called it, with expectations. What do you think they're going to do going into the series, and how do they perform? Because ultimately that's how we look at it, because who they're playing matters. The time of the year matters. Yeah. All of that does matter. The advanced retreat is just saying that a different way, I think. But I think for him, I don't know how much he would have disagreed with our grades on this, because he did say at the end of your last podcast that he was hoping for 3 out of 4, and anything less than that would be a disappointment. So I think he probably would be on the D scale too, with just how that worked. Because I agree, your expectation when you're going into that is you want them to win 3 out of 4. And it is in Detroit. They did have a rain delay. They did have a game postponed. A lot of other stuff happened. But still, your expectation you can't be satisfied with splitting a series in Detroit.
All right, well, let's move forward here. Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
3 quick ones here. Nothing really earth-shattering, but some more details have come out about the Shohei Ohtani and this his translator Ippy. I don't even know how to say it.
I don't know either. The worst gambler of all time, apparently.
Yes, bad gambler, lost a whole bunch of money. It's becoming more and more obvious that he was just straight stealing from Ohtani's checking account. He had set them all up for him. I don't know how Ohtani doesn't have a money manager. It seems like something that most guys should have who are making that kind of bank. But the funny thing about this that you pointed out, Hogs, via text, is that he spent a whole bunch of money to buy baseball cards.
Yeah, he had like $320,000 worth of baseball cards or something like that. I mean, there are so many funny tweets. Like, X has just been hilarious through all of this. But basically, he averaged, 25 bets of $12,500 average a day. And he came out with it with a bunch of baseball cards and $40 million in debt.
Whoops.
It's just insane.
That's a hard one. It's a hard one to explain to the wife, I think, folks.
I feel like we could talk about this forever, because it does seem like Shohei was completely uninvolved and at absolute worst just guilty of being more naive than anyone has ever been on earth. It kind of seems like good for the game of baseball that their star isn't going to be dragged through the mud on this. It doesn't seem like, but my goodness.
And we all know Rocky 3 is the best evidence that, like, these sports guys, they can be taken advantage of. I mean, Rocky lost all of his savings. He had to fight Mr. T. It's a whole thing.
On a more serious note, this gambling thing has to be reined in. The promotions, the league signing all of these deals with FanDuel and all of these other gambling sites, like, something needs to change or give, because it's becoming a real problem. And I love to do the daily fantasy gambling. Like, it's fun. It makes the games more enjoyable, but it's a real problem for some people. And when this starts getting into sports, you look at like the basketball controversy that's going on, where that player, they like millions of dollars on his prop bets that he didn't play in those games. This is going to impact the integrity of all of these professional sports. And they just went into it willy-nilly, and they should be very, very liable for what happens after this, because of all these marketing deals that they've signed with these gambling websites. And I don't think we can continue down the route that we are, or there's going to be so many situations like this. Like, thankfully, baseball dodged a bullet here, but they won't next time.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely that gambling will not have a negative impact on the sport in the long run. 2 other quick hits here, Hogs. Since 2017, do you know, Hogs, who leads the Marlins in home runs hit?
I only do because you sent the stat. Giancarlo Stanton still leads with 1 year. He hit, 59 home runs that year, and he's still in first place for the Marlins. That is unbelievable. That is one of the funniest baseball stats, and baseball has the weirdest stats in the world. That one may have got me the most. I laughed very hard when you sent that one over.
Super funny. Last note here. We alluded to this earlier, but Angel Hernandez shouldn't be allowed to umpire anymore. He rung up a guy in the Houston versus Rangers game on 3 pitches that were all outside of the zone. The strikeout pitch, Hogs, 7 inches outside of the strike zone.
I watched that clip so many times, but honestly, this is deja vu. We knew this 5 years ago that Angel Hernandez shouldn't be umpiring in Major League Baseball. Do they like it just because all press is good press? Like, what is happening?
All right, well, let's make our Puckets picks for the upcoming Orioles series, and then let's get out of here.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Puckets picks.
So listeners are going to take Jeffers off the board. I'm going to go with Alex Kirilloff, and then Dan takes Buxton, hoping for a bounce back, and that just leaves you, Hogs.
I'm going with Austin Martin. I don't think I would have taken him if I got to pick earlier, but hey, he won one for me. I think he's still going to put balls in play. I'm going with Martin.
Well, I think that's a wise pick, honestly, out of the players who are left. And with that, Hogs, thanks so much for filling in, and I'm going to go ahead and send us out. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook page and Instagram page. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Link in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.